one in there?
Sure.
Get this one. Okay, welcome to the last session of Consult with Clients. So we'll be discussing topic 6 today, and that is workplace policies and procedures. All right. So this will help you with completing your last assignment or last assessment, which will be assessment 4. And I'm just going to give a quick presentation on what is required for workplace policies and procedures. It's not a very long session, and then we'll go into looking at the requirements for assessment 4. That is due for next week, so you can actually see it's a follow-on from approval to proceed, and usually in the workplace that should take place in a couple of days to do any amendments or anything like that. So a lot of other students or in industry, it could also be known as, which I've mentioned previously, that it could be actually seen as a building contract. Okay? And then you give it to the client, and then the client maybe has queries about a few changes or needs to just alternate or change a few things that he's maybe not happy with, and it must be in accordance with you too. All right? So it's not something where it just comes and you're addressing only what he's saying. It has to work in your favor too. So then you come to a conclusion, and then you draft up the last, not draft, you actually complete the last paper, which is then what we call as a client brief. Okay. Whereas they might call it version 2 of the building contract. It could be also be seen as that. Okay. But because this is consult with clients, we're keeping it as the final design brief, so that everyone, which is the correct name when you actually produce the documentation. Okay. So just to let you know where we are in the program for the external students, I'm just going to go before you start, and I'm going to the learning program, and over here you can actually see that we are now in completion stage. We're in week 8, and you can actually see that with that we're looking at the workplace procedures, and then I'll go through the formal letter of the final design brief, and your assessment 3 is then due, of course, this evening. Okay, I just keep it at 5 o'clock, but you've got until 12 o'clock tonight. And then, of course, the following week, I'm hoping to have marked these by Friday so that I can give you feedback. And then with that, then you are able to move on to task 4. And task 4 is to be completed. I've given you till Friday the 27th, so I have extended that a bit. So it's not the following Wednesday. So please make note of that. If you want to hand it in earlier, you can. So that would be then the 25th. That would be the Wednesday. But you've got until the Friday the 27th to hand in your final assessment, which we'll be discussing today. So assessment 4. All right. With that being said, I'll go through the requirements needed for assessment 4 so that everyone is understanding exactly what is required there. And you'll see that there's a very close similarity between task 3 and task 4. Okay, that's why it shouldn't take too much time. There should be only a few amendments made to the approval to proceed to make it a final assessment task 4. Okay. Right, so I just want to see if that's recording. Yes, that's recording. Okay. So let's jump right in and go to the topic 6, which is workplace policies and procedures. And we have workplace policies and procedures here. And let's start off by finding out what you understand by a workplace policy or a procedure. Does anyone understand that? Like TAFE has policies that you have to adhere to. When you came in to enroll for this course, there were some policies that you actually had to address or understand. I gave you a policy in the beginning of this course, actually. What was that?
A set of like guidelines and rules that you adhere to in the workplace, and then procedures is how you implement them.
Correct. Well done. Yep. So that is spot on. It's a set of rules and kind of guidelines to keep us on track, and the procedure is how do we take those rules and implement them. Okay, so that's spot on with regards to the policies and procedures. If we don't have that, then everyone would be on doing different things, and there wouldn't be a structured environment. So one of the policies at TAFE, at the beginning of this the session, I actually asked you all to be familiar with your submission. That was a policy with regards to giving you 2 attempts. So the first attempt was with regards to handing in on the correct due date. If that was not addressed, then that would be seen as a first attempt. And then you get a second attempt with a resubmission date if any of your work is incorrect, or if you have submitted late and you submit within the resubmission due date, that's seen as a second attempt. If that's not addressed, then of course that would be seen as not satisfactory. And if you have a one assessment that is not complete out of, say, for instance, 4, then that would be seen as a withdrawal to be able to complete next term. All right. So that's a policy there. So and it had to be implemented so that everyone's on the same page and that they know what their circumstances are, and hence why with the face-to-face class, I got you to sign that policy to understand that you know what that's all about. All right. So that's just a simple thing there with regards to a policy there. Some businesses might have a policy with regards to a dress code. So, for instance, a law firm has a strict policy in terms of what can be worn to court and what can't be worn to court. So that would be seen as an attire that people would have to address there. All right, but that's slightly off the topic with regards to relating it to the building industry. So let's move on. So every business, no matter what, large or small, operates through documenting the workplace policy and procedure. Okay. So that all staff can follow these guidelines. So it is a set of rules, which is correct. All right, or principles that aims to guide managers and workers in how to behave in the workplace. All right, so there is maybe a different set of principles for the managers, and there might be a set of rules for the workplace employees. So just to take that into consideration. The workplace should have policies and procedures in place for numerous different issues. Very important. With regards to companies, these issues are quite important with regards to maybe being bullied into a situation. Who do we address for that? So larger companies or even some smaller companies now have a human resource team. And the reason for that is that it's for you as an employee to feel safe enough to go and tell them your issue in terms of being either bullied into a situation which you are feeling uncomfortable about. There's also harassment. This is a huge topic with regards to workplace people working or resources working in industry. and especially within our built industry with men and women alike. Okay? Internet use. There will be some companies that allow you access to internet for research, so you'll have access to the World Wide Web, but some other people have limited access, so they're not allowed to have access to Facebook or social media, okay? So it's purely only for, say, for instance, I'll just use the reference, like Google, for instance, but they won't have access to Facebook or anything like that. And the reason for that is that it increases, or what they believe it increases, then, work, but it decreases the time spent on the internet looking at social media. I have a bit of a mixed feeling about that, because sometimes your social media is required for your business to see about your leads in terms of getting more business. So there is that fine line of understanding the rules and regulations when it comes to internet use. Health and safety, well, if you look at TAFE, we've got definitely a big emphasis on health and safety, as known as work health and safety. At the beginning of this course and the beginning of every term, we always, or not term, every semester, we always implement the work health and safety procedures in terms of either practicing a drill or showing you where to go in case there is a fire or a safety hazard happening within the building. And everyone should know what to do with that. That was quite interesting. You know that 9/11's just happened. 9/11 has just passed with the remembrance of the Twin Towers falling. And I watched a documentation on that about the survivors. Did anyone see that show on SBS? It was last week. And it was actually quite interesting how so many of them knew what to do in terms of health and safety, because, the Twin Towers actually had many businesses in it. It wasn't just, one kind of business. They had banking in there, they had computer companies in there, etc. And the Pacific people they were interviewing was on level, I think, 86 and 87, where in the second building of, which is Tower 2, so Tower 2, and that was where the second plane hit. But how they were in terms of evacuation was really scary, in a sense that some of them didn't even know how to get from their office to the stairwells to evacuate. Some people were still lining up at the elevators trying to see if they could be able to go down on that. And one of the guys said, don't waste your time with the elevator, you need to just get down the stairs. And then there was this massive panic, and it just felt very, what can I say, it just felt very disorganized. And I think if they could have just actually implemented their work health and safety procedure, I think a lot more people would have been saved. So it was really interesting to see it from that perspective, in terms of a survivor's point of view, and not from a media point of view. So in that sense, that was quite an interesting topic with the health and safety when it came to a life-threatening situation. There was even a time where the announcement came on. Sorry, and I'm going a bit off board here, but an announcement came on, which we have here. So you'll often hear that a lady's voice comes on, and she will say, please evacuate, or there's something that she says in terms of, please make your way to the stairwells or something like that. This lady came on, and in a very calm voice, she said, no need to panic. If you feel you would like to go back to your desks and offices, please do. And that was the most scariest thing I heard, because one of the people emphasized, or the boss actually of this company called Baseline, which was on the 86th and 87th floor. Now, the second plane hit a level above them. So that's why they were emphasizing on those 2 levels, all right? They started already evacuating, and they only lost 3 people on their floor, which was quite amazing considering that they were so high up in the levels. And I remember the boss being interviewed, and he said, irrespective of what that lady was saying, he felt in himself that he needed to make a move with his team. And he said, don't listen to that announcement. We are making that move. And he actually made his team move down the stairwells. Okay. So really interesting to find out the what naivety of a large building like that. Okay. So you can actually see these workplace policies and procedures are not there to be ignored. They really are quite vital in terms of making sure that we as people are supported as well as safe. All right. So that's why social media, etc., links to internet use. So some companies will allow media, social media, because they're checking in to see if there's any job opportunities, or if there's any comments with regards to their workmanship. So they would play a huge emphasis on that, and therefore it wouldn't be seen as something that is excused from internet usage. All right. So those are the things that I would say is most critical about really understanding why policies and procedures are put into place. All right, so the reason for that, as I've just said there, so that everyone knows what to do and respects the standards. Very important. They know how to behave and perform, all right? So there is a set of rules and guidelines for decision making, and that employers and managers do not need to continually ask senior managers what to do, all right? Because you've been given that manual, or you have access to policies and procedures, say for instance on the Learn site. Or there will be a manual given to you if you're entering a new job for working for a company. Usually this is brought into your orientation day, all right? So your first day at work, or maybe even before you start, they would say, please can you go through this document, and in there that would be a policy or procedure, and it can highlight exactly anything from dress attire to your use of social media, etc., etc. Okay, so they help with adopting a consistent and clear response across the company. They're also allowed to demonstrate that employees will be treated fairly and equally. So you can see there's a very frustrated lady there biting her computer. It feels that her needs are not met, and we don't want that to happen, all right? We want people to feel supported in that sense. So it's the whole idea of having to be an accepted method of dealing with client complaints. So that's also a way of dealing with the situation. They will also have a document as part of the policy and procedure in dealing with clients that are seen as difficult, or dealing with complaints, and how do you deal with that. So there would be a bit of training in that, or there would be a section on that within your document. So the framework for delegation of decision making, it is set in these guidelines. They give you a means of communicating information to new employees, and often part of induction process. So that's what I said. So when you start a new position, this document will be handed to you, okay? And in that would be then everything that helps you with completing your job successfully, and knowing also what your rights are, okay? Very, very important. So they offer you with protection, and they often are given by a government legislation. So in other words, South Australia would have its own legislation, different to, say, for instance, someone working in maybe a similar situation, just say, for instance, in New South Wales, okay? I'm just using that as an example because there's sometimes that does happen, but it could be exactly the same. The main thing is that it needs to be properly be implemented and monitored. Because it's difficult to get all this right first up. Usually consultations with government bodies and industry representatives help form the basis of these types of policies and procedures, which I've just mentioned earlier. Okay, and then some typical drafting office procedures might be in terms of record keeping. So this would appeal to you, okay? So for instance, if you now are leaving, all right, you've gotten this far with the Cumberland Hotel, just say, okay? And you are working for KJ Designs. I've just made that up, all right? And due to your situation, you're leaving, you're moving into states or whatever, and you've created this rapport with the clients of the Cumberland Hotel, but now due to the circumstances, you're leaving, but you don't want to leave the client in the lurch. So someone is brought in to either an employee or someone brand new taking over your position, and you need to be able to brief them. So Terry, I'm just going to use you as an example. So Terry is the person that's taking over my job, okay? And instead of me having to waste the time and resources in briefing him, I literally have a section within our shared computers system that I can actually say, here's all the documentation, Terry. Everything is documented there, and I hand everything to him. I say to him, go through it. If there's anything you don't understand, please report to me. And it should be very, very clear in a folder situation. And that is one of your requirements that you are needed for assessment 4, which is a clear snapshot or a what can I say, a print screenshot of where you're documenting these assessments of yours, which will be actually seen as reports or letters from the client and research. Okay. So this is important in the sense of all the information will be kept there in terms of how is the client records kept, where are the photos of the site kept, how does everyone know what file to work on? Well, there should be then a project number because you might be working for a company that has worked on many projects, and you can be able then to tell the colleague or the person taking over your position to know exactly where to look. And then how is the client how are client communications viewed by all the project team? All right, so that should all be documented under a folder system, which is what will apply to you. All right, so just a continuation. Who's checking the drawings that you were doing? So that would be maybe response from council, if there's any like liaison with them, or maybe you've got a colleague that oversees the quality of your work. That could be a senior manager, for instance, or your manager. And in that sense, you could actually see the different drafts of the drawings or the conceptual ideas that you're proposing. And then what checking methods are used that are common to all staff? So in other words, that's quality checking again. What are the ways of how to do that? So for instance, for that there is how do staff know if drawings have been checked and amended? So that's what I said earlier with regards to versions. You could look at a date or a version. So all of you, I'm sure, are busy either doing Rivet or have done Rivet or have completed AutoCAD or about to do AutoCAD. And as the emphasis goes there, when you open up a new drawing to start, you always save it as the new version. Okay, so that's a version or it goes by date. So that is how you can track what the latest version is, so that if anyone comes in, so like Terry taking over my position, he knows that he wouldn't be looking at draft 01, he'll be looking at the version of 05. Does that make sense? Okay. So you can actually see there's a real process to everything. All right, so literally that's the the session today in terms of all the topic that we're looking at in terms of workplace policies and procedures. It's a very quick session, but it's very simple. It's literally the rules and regulations required for a business. How do you implement that, and how do you address that, and what is your limitation within applying those rules and regulations, and what are your rights? That's the most important thing, because you also need to be supported by the company you are working for. All right, any questions on this so far? Does it make sense? Does it make sense to you all? Okay, great. Okay, so let's just close that. And then we're going to jump into our assessment and submissions, where we are going to be looking at assessment 4. All right? All right, so for those, just emphasizing again, you need to fill this out, and you need to either attach it as a separate document when you upload your final brief, or you can implement or paste in your client brief into this document. Now, I know that it does become a little bit difficult doing that, so I really don't mind you putting in this as a separate document, as a Word document. Please do not save it as a PDF, because I need to provide you with feedback on this. Okay. So you'd fill out your student name. You don't have to worry about your signature, the date, and then this is where I would fill in my name. All right, because I am assessing you. All right, let's just scroll down. So there's your project information. All right, and here is the workplace policy procedure document management and filing. All right, so it says here, you are also required to set up a structure to manage your files. Prior to commencement of this assessment task, you will need to create a job number for your project. Select a suitable hardware drive, so you're saving it either to your computer or to your USB or to the cloud or to OneDrive. All documents are to be recorded, filed, and regularly updated. And this is what I am looking for, something like this. Please do not take a snapshot of this and submit it, because I know that this is mine, okay? Previous students from last semester thought this was a good idea, and they just took a snapshot of this and submitted. I was like, no. I really need to see it as in your order, or with your name, or with your project number, or with the latest dates. You've got to make it as if it's yours, all right? So here we can actually see, like some of them, I knew that they had done it, because there's nothing really with marketing that I've asked you to do, okay? This was just showing some of the folders here of what I've created, but you really need to make sure that applies. And it could be either assessments, you could go by assessments, or to make it more appealing, put it as the heading of each assessment, okay? So like research was your first assessment, then it was meeting with the client and feedback. You could just do a subheading of that, all right? So you could actually say, meeting with the client, response from clients, all right? And, put in information there. Sustainability research, that was number 2, for instance. If there's any like client responses or emails, you can, pretend to have that in there. And then, your final brief is your design brief there. All right, so you've really got to make it your own. All right, so the purpose of this is to have a project job number and address to be included, company logo to be included on the document, identify design constraints and present research. So this is all going to be part of the last assessment here, which I'll get into now. All right. So these all have to be addressed for your last assessment. All right. Now, I can't emphasize this enough. This is almost a replica of approval to proceed, the assessment before this, number 3. Okay? The reason for that, and I know that I'm sounding like a record on repeat, but I have to emphasize this because I know that there will be students coming back to me and saying, but it's exactly the same. I don't understand what's different. There are some slight differences. It's as if I have read, say, for instance, Nina's report on approval to proceed, and I have queried one thing, and I said to her, Nina, I feel that I don't understand what will happen in terms of if I sign this, what is the schedule of events, or what is the process? And that's one of the things that you then have to put into this document that was missing from assessment 3. Okay. Now, if you were a much smaller class, I would individually give you something to change. But because you are such a large class, and because there's a lot of external students, we've only had to amend one slight thing. And we're wanting to see the difference in terms of assessment 3 and assessment 4. Because in real life, if I was the client, and say, for instance, Terry gave me his approval to proceed letter, I might come back to Terry and say, and Terry's fee is like, say, for instance, ridiculous, like something like 20% of the project. I'd be shocked. And I'd be saying, Terry, can you explain why it's 20%? Because I have done a bit of research and I see that with a project of this size, it would be beneficial to work within a range of, 3% to maybe 7.5%. Is there a reason that you can support why it's 20%? Then he would either come back to me and say X, Y, and Z, or he would say, sure, we can amend this. Or I might even just say, I'm not too keen on the payment methods. Is there a way that we can maybe break it up even more because of my my banking limitation on terms of transfers of money? Okay. And then, of course, Terry would amend that and then give it up as a final brief. Do you see how slightly that is just the slight difference? That's what I'm looking for. Okay. So you'll see that this is almost like a repeat of assessment 3. Again, we're identifying design constraints specific to the location, and there's your clue. I'm looking for now specific things, compliance and heritage constraints. Okay? You've repeated that many a time. You've even done it in this assessment 3. But we want it a bit more clearer. Okay? Present and negotiate your research to the client. Well, with that, we're looking at the research that you think is maybe applicable to help them with their vision and brief. So you can actually see these two here affect number 3. And you've already maybe identified that in approval to proceed. So it's just tweaking it a bit to simplify it so that we can be able to make it plain and simple for the client when it comes to signing that last document. Often this is a more condensed version than approval to proceed. All right, because the client knows from approval to proceed what it is, but you're just reiterating certain things. Okay. All right, 3. Review and convey the client's brief and vision. So what did we know as the client brief and vision? Exactly.
And a drive-through sales area.
Yes, exactly. So that was with regards to the project information given right at the beginning of this course. So it was his initial or project information that he gave you, and that was his vision. But you need to make sure that does that vision of his in terms of creating this amazing place relate to the compliance and heritage. Okay. So again, it's a repeat there. Then you can also bring in your sustainability, materials, and construction methods. So in other words, with that, we're looking at your sustainability project you did. So we want to see some visual there again. So that was just an insert from assessment 3 again. So that's a bit of a repeat there. 4, present at least one hand sketch and other style imagery to help convey your ideas to the client. So some of you have already done that. We just need to reiterate that a little bit more clearly in this document. So you can actually see there is that repeat, but the purpose of it is that you don't want to provide him with a whole new document. He needs to see that there is that similarity, because that's just that slight change. Okay. Establish a fee structure and conditions of service. Well, you did that for 3, didn't you? So then that's a repeat. So you bring that back in. This is now something new. Number 5. Identify terms of engagement. So that would be in terms of signing now this final brief, what is seen as the process or the schedule of events by moving forward. So once we've signed, what is seen as the go-ahead? What are you doing first? What's point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5? So that the client knows, okay, if I pay this deposit, what am I getting from that? What is the designer doing first? He is going to probably start doing you guys are probably going to start doing some concept design work and getting that all ready for council submission. Okay. So I'll show you where we can find an example of that to guide you if you're feeling a bit lost. So we'll show you what that is. Seek approval to proceed for final design brief. Issue a sign-off for both parties. What's that? You've done it. Yeah, that's the last page, right? It's the method of approval. It's the signing part of the document. That's what you're aiming for. You want that client to sign. You want him to say, yes, go ahead. And the minute he signs, you issue him then your invoice, which will be your first payments, so that you can receive that money to progress with regards to completing the documentation stage. Because at this stage now, both parties are very, very clear in terms of what are you delivering and what is he receiving. Okay. If there's anything that's out of the ordinary, that would be seen as a new entry into a new contract. All right. So if he says to you, I need to now think of building, I'm just making this up, a 2-story parking lot at the back. You'll go, no, that wasn't in your initial vision or your initial brief to me, and I've addressed that all the way through. Now there's this change. We'll have to negotiate on that or go into a new agreement. All right, then, say again? Say again?
This is a hell of a lot of work.
Yeah.
That we're doing if you were in business.
Mm.
In hours before you even got anywhere.
But
what would you consider a normal hour, like not hourly rate, but amount of hours that, say, on this that you'd spend to get to this stage of now signed? Do you consider
right.
a week's work?
Yeah. So usually this would take up to about maximum 2 to 3 weeks, not more than a month, in terms of negotiations with regards to the client in getting onto the same page so that both parties know exactly what is moving on to complete. All right. So this would all be usually through not really meeting, but through emails or and research and all that. I agree. It's about three weeks. Yeah.
Effectively a month's worth of work.
But that's why it's incorporated in your fee. Your fee.
Your fee is when he signs.
Yes, it's when he signs. That's
you've lost your fee.
exactly. But imagine. Yeah, that's why you make sure that you get to this point knowing that he is going to move forward and sign. And you will feel very much knowing that even before you get to the stage where it's going. So he could actually defer it in approval to proceed. All right? That's why you saw that one option, that one presentation that I showed, or sorry, one paper that I showed you of a student approval to proceed, where she actually provided 3 options at the end of signing. She provided a yes as a go-ahead, a decline, or an amendment, I think it was. So there were 3 options there that the client could actually respond by. Okay.
Would you consider, and I'm just thinking about the one that I got back on, this is where my brain's going, but that on that particular one I asked for $1,500 up front, and we negotiated $750. I did some rough conceptual stuff, and then he backed out. Do you think that would have been, now thinking about this,
Yeah.
where I would find it?
Yeah, because did you have it in writing? And did he pay that $750?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there we go. So that okay. So I just have to repeat that.
It was a big project. It was
Okay.
$1.5 million house.
All right. So I just, for the external students, I have a student in my class that has just said that he works in industry, and he said in order to progress with his project, he wanted to do some conceptual ideas for the client, and he said it would cost about $15,000. The client came back and said, I think that's too much. They negotiated on $750, and the student was able to provide those drawings. But then there was nothing followed on further, so that was seen as all the work that was completed. That is perfect. There was negotiations in that, as well as there was a payment made, but that was the end. He can do whatever with those concept drawings as he wants, but it was done in a written contract, a written version. So that's exactly the same as this. But with something like that, you can make it as simple as just that by actually staging it, saying, okay, we could look at first concept, and that would be seen as a contract, or entering into a contract there. Then you could actually move on. If you were submitting anything to council, any preparation, that could also be seen as a second document or an amendment to your building contract with them. Okay, so we're making it a little bit more complex in a sense that we're trying to make sure that in this case we are proceeding that the client is going to go ahead with us, and that there is this much documentation to cover. Because the point is that you don't want to enter into just a verbal agreement, which often happens, where you say, I'll do this for you, and the client thinks that you're doing that for him, and then you do all this for him, and then he backs out and he's got all your work. Does that make sense? Or he's got your ideas. So you're really wanting to be able to get to a point where both parties are very, very well aware of what is being produced and what is being received. All right. So like I said to you in the previous class that given, or the previous topic, where there's no gray area. It really needs to be quite black and white. And that's why this is such a thorough document in this sense. Okay. All right. And a lot of people miss out on the stage because they think, oh, well, we just want to dive right in and get to it and really just do, like, getting the work done. But as Doug was saying, you go ahead and you do all this work and you haven't received any money. And then it's to your detriment because you lose out then. But if you've got something in place that can cover this by moving forward, then at least you're getting something from them. All right? Before actually doing too much work, they can also just say to you, no, we don't want to proceed with you. We've actually got someone else that we wanting. And that's a risk that we have to take in industry. But before we can even get to doing too much work, at least we've still in documentation stage. And that's why it's right in the beginning of the course, I said to you, hence why you don't have to go to the Cumberland Hotel, because you actually want the client to provide you with all the necessary information via email or in phone conversation, before actually having to do your first site visit, because that costs you money. Remember, you're traveling there, it's taking up your time, etc. So this should actually really cost you very minimal time and effort and resources to be able to produce something like this. It will actually just only be phone calls and emails and your time, really. Okay, and that's what we have to do in terms of trying to get work out there. Okay.
Can I suggest as well, once you have done one or two of these, generally you can take bits and you can amend from previous projects. So
Yes.
so that preparing this entire document won't take quite so long, and then also as you're getting more used to going through and doing the research, there will be things that you're able to just refer back to.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would recycle all your work.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Recycle your knowledge and recycle,
Yeah.
your contracts.
Yeah.
Change the number.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So just to repeat that, because the speaker's here. So for external students, one of the students has just said, just to kind of reiterate what I've said, what happens is that this shouldn't actually take as long for new projects or coming up projects, because you've done the hard graft and this, and you could actually just amend it slightly according to making it more personal. So it's almost like recycling your documentation, that you can be able to do things in a quicker amount of time. Okay. What did I say that correctly? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically
Yeah.
once you've done one, you can
Exactly.
the next one you can take the bulk of it and then you can just
Yes.
change bits. Yeah.
So once you've done one, you can take the bulk of it and change it just slightly. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I have to address, in order for you to pass this assessment, you have to address all of these. Okay. And including number 9, which is, as per your work procedure, document management and filing, all student research and documentation are to be recorded, filed, and regularly updated. So for that requirement, I'm looking at students to provide evidence of a screenshot of where they're saving their work. All right, so that's simply done. And in here, you can explain to me, oopsie, where's my... I want you to fill this out. So explain how you have backed up your computer files to prevent loss of work. So I need to know where you're saving this, okay? So either the cloud, USB, on your computer, whatever. So that's important. All right, so make sure you don't just stop up to 8. You need to complete 9A and B. All right. A lot of students forgot to do either A or B from last semester. Okay. And then that's what I will fill in. This is the part that I would give you feedback in. So it's satisfactory or not satisfactory, and I give you your name, etc. Okay. All right, so let's just close that, and let's just look at, I'm just going to go up here to this example. So approval to proceed is under, this one is under 3. She kind of combined the two together in this option. But here is the part that I need to give you some clues. There, process and schedule. That is the terms of engagement, all right? That could also be in terms of terms and conditions. But at this point, I'm looking at how are you moving forward with the client once they have signed. So this would be then actually going to site and taking some measurements. This would be then looking at addressing maybe some phoning up some consultants, which will be your engineer, which will be your arborist, but then to say to them that the scheduled meetings would be done with the client and the fees will be paid by the client and not yourself. You've got to this point where the client then signs off the final brief. You can actually move that to 1 because that's exactly what's happened, or you can delete that. And then you can start by getting everything ready for planning approval for the council that is required, which is the Port Adelaide Enfield Council. And then you can either get the client to submit the documentation so that it's not your costing, or you can do it yourself for them for planning approval. Once planning approval is granted, then this is develop and hand over to clients. And then clients can submit for building consent, or you could say you could submit for building consent to the...
What's the benefit, and I'm curious on this,
Mhm.
what's the benefit of us doing it over the client? A, financial, yes.
Yes.
If the client pays that,
Yeah.
okay. But I notice on documentation on a build that I'm doing,
Mhm.
because while I did the design, I've got an architect
So you finish it all.
submitted.
Mhm.
Okay, so then it was registered as architectural.
Mhm.
But then now his name's all over everything, and creates a problem when he's out of the scene, because all I hired him for was just to give me what I'd already done.
Yeah.
But all correspondence seem now to go to him.
Mm.
So is there a benefit for us as designers, or is it more benefit to the client having their name on it if they're paying for it?
Yep. So the question's asked, who benefits from, or is it beneficial for you as the designer to submit for council for planning approval and building consent, or is it beneficial for the client? To answer that, it would be financial. So financially, it would be maybe in your favor for them to submit, because you've already got your logo design on that information, but the correspondence could either be negotiated that it comes to you or it comes to the client, and then the client can actually forward it back onto you. So it actually doesn't matter there. But in your situation where you had an architect, he probably might get frustrated that he's receiving all the correspondence, and he could actually then make a note and say to council, please, all correspondence to go to Doug. Or you could actually maybe have created some kind of negotiation where it's involved in his fee to still receive the documentation to forward it on to you. So it's more of a financial thing than anything else. But yeah, then there is that fine line of who do they correspond with. So sometimes it is easier for you as a designer to just take that on and submit, or purely from a financial point of view, then it could be that it's beneficial for the client to submit. All right. Then building consent. Then this building consent and final development approval is granted. There might be amendments. Remember that. Someone might come back and say you need to amend that. Then you need to tell the client that would be seen as an extra cost, and there your hourly rate could come in. All right, because you need to do those amendments. Or there might be somewhere in here that you'll grant that there's 3 copies that you provide, and maybe you allow for 1 amendment, if there are any amendments. Okay, so that's something that is missing from this part here. You would not do any of this, because this part is for what she is mentioning, that she is looking at shortlisting some builders, and then she's taking it right over to handover. So you would actually finish more so at point 11, all right? Not from 12 onwards. And if you are wanting to see another example, one of the lecturers, and you've probably seen this in some of your other classes, I think it's over here, understanding a brief. There is a design brief. I think this is it here, design brief example. No, that's not it, sorry. Was it here? Oh, here. No. There. So there's the one here under the topic, I think communication. There's this is done by one of the lecturers. So this is done by Jason Anderson, and he's done it as a quote. It's quite a nice layout, as he's done some of his imagery down the side, and he's done all his text down here. And there's his process or schedule to proceed there. So you could also look at that example and what needs to be done. So he's taken it up to building consent and development approval granted. Okay, so that's where you would be finishing. And then, of course, you put in your fee structure there. And here he's actually incorporated what he'll do with his fee. Okay. And then he's given the payment options there. All right. So if you're wanting to look at this example, it is an old example, and it has been repeated in other units, like for Mirren's class, etc. So I didn't want to show this example, but if you are wanting to have a look at it for some extra information, please do. So it is under, let's just close that. It's under the topic 4, service levels, costs and fees. All right, so you can just go down to example of quote there. Okay. All right, has anyone got any further questions with regards to this session and moving? Because there's going to be no class next week. It will be just for you to hand up then your assessment 4. So assessment 3 is due today, and then assessment 4, you've got until next week Friday to submit. Okay. I'm hoping to get everything back to you by Friday. So it's a big marking session for me, but it will be all good. Okay.
When you say that there's a slight change, that's why you're doing this. Who does a slight change? Do we have to put a slight change in, or are you going to give us a slight change to finish it off?
No, that's why the requirements are there. The requirements actually provide the slight change. You've got to address those there to make sure that there's a lot of repeats, but there's one part that is different that you need to implement. So they'll basically requirement 1, 2, and 3 is very similar to requirement 1, 2, and 3 of assessment 3. But you can condense it or refine it. Now, please remember that your cover letter has to change. Instead of saying thank you for, or this is the approval to proceed letter, you're going to have to change that to this is the final brief letter. Okay. I saw that was a lot of repeats from last semester's students where they forgot their cover letter and they just put it in. And it's not the approval to proceed. This is the final brief. So you've got to thank the client now for, having the time to look at the approval to proceed. You've taken on his points, and now you are submitting the final brief. All right. So that's the cover letter part there. Okay. So a lot of you have done a cover letter for assignment 3, which is great. You've got to tweak it slightly to address it for your last assessment. Okay. Perfect. Any questions? Any further questions?
There has to be a cover letter in this final one.
Yes, so you've got to do a cover letter again for assessment. No, it doesn't have to be a cover letter, sorry. It could be a few lines. It could be like, if you look at the example Green Frog Designs, they've just gone straight in. They said, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Whatever, Clover, I think it was. Here you will find your approval to proceed letter. If you've got any questions or if you've got any queries, please could you kindly let us know. And then he went straight into the document. Whereas some people actually brought in a few other information and do a longer cover letter. All right. Where you've actually got the address of the client. That was important. We need to see who you're addressing this to. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All good? Okay. So it's very, very clear in terms of your requirements for assessment 3 and requirements for assessment 4. And look at the examples provided. All right. They are not addressing all the requirements. I've just used those as examples. All right. You need to change it and dissect it and make it your own. Okay. All right. That concludes the session. Thank you, everyone.